Frequent question that you get asked, particularly when you're talking about new chapters, membership growth, all of those things, is why is AABE then uniquely positioned and has a unique value proposition that we think, personally I think, every energy professional, particularly African American energy professional, would find value in involvement and engagement with AABE. And I tell people any energy professional would find value in getting involved in AABE based on my own personal experience with AABE. So what's the value to the individual members? So we'll talk about that. What's the value to many of us in the industry come out of large corporations? What's the value to those companies within which we work for our involvement, our engagement in AABE, and then for them directly? What's the value then to our community? I think definitely we need to think about that. And then what's the value? I would even broaden it further. What's the value to our diaspora? What's the value that this organization brings globally? And so first let's talk about the membership. I got introduced to AABE, and somebody said you need to come to the national conference. And so that was my first time seeing so many African Americans in such prominent roles within the industry. And I sat there and I thought to myself, all these years, 15 years in this energy business, and I had never had access to this kind of talent and network. That so many of us in one place who were willing to be helpful, willing to develop relationships, willing to reach out. And those relationships for me have meant everything in terms of my growth and my development. And I know everybody here has a similar story, particularly once you got involved. Now, hopefully you were a little bit more fortunate than me that you got involved maybe a little bit sooner in your career, but I mean, I can just tell you what it's meant to me. Many of us have an aging workforce. I know that's certainly the case for us, and it's the case particularly for utilities that are engaged and involved. But it's a similar story across most industries. It's just more acute in the energy sector, and then even more acute in the utility space. So what I would describe is that there's a massive crew change that's about to occur. And so as we as baby boomers begin to retire, there's going to be a tremendous need for replacement of talent, experience, and ability. Now I want you to couple that with the fact that as you look at the American populace, is getting more and more diverse. And you hear the numbers. I think we end up putting these numbers off like, it's somewhere out in the future that this is going to occur, that the majority of the American population is going to be minorities, people of color. We say it like, and you hear it, well, 2040. I mean, I heard that date. It's about 2040 that the majority of the American population is going to be minority. Well, I can tell you right now, in most metropolitan areas, and I know for a fact in and around Atlanta, if you look at 15 and under in most of the metropolitan areas, it's already majority minority. So it's not off in the never, never land. It's not off in some 20-year future. It's already occurring in most metropolitan areas. And many of us have our headquarters located in those metropolitan areas, and our customer base is heavily concentrated in those metropolitan areas. And certainly the people that we are looking to make sure that we are being of service to are in those metropolitan areas. So within that backdrop of having to gain access to talent, let me also give you a statistic here. The last numbers I've seen show that from a match of talent to jobs here in the next 20 years, that if the economy recovers, and that's a big if, but if the economy recovers, we will have a shortfall of about 25 million people to jobs. So the way I would describe that then, if you can imagine that kind of shortfall in the labor force, 25 million people. If you can imagine that kind of shortfall, and I've heard these words used, and I certainly use them, there's going to be a war for talent. There's going to be a war for talent. And in that war for talent, if that talent is more diverse, how well equipped are our companies to compete for that talent? Who is better equipped than those of us who already live in a multicultural world to begin to think about and not only be cultural informants, but to help manage that diversity? At least this way it works for me. I don't know if it works this way for you, but the way it works for me is I have to first understand it conceptually and understand and grasp it, even in its most complex, moving parts and dynamics. I have to grasp that. Then I have to spend time breaking it down to say, now, how would I ever explain that to anybody? And there was no other place that I could go where I was going to get that. I don't know about you, but there is no other place that I could go to get that. So that's the value to our community, is having us well equipped, not only to understand the dynamics, but to be able to explain it to anybody in a way that makes sense to them. So that perhaps they can be more informed, and they can also get engaged. And our kids can understand it as well. That our kids can someday have aspirations to be a part of this business. The scholarships that we offer, the insight that we offer through the programs for the youth. I mean, all those things are of critical value and critical importance. A buddy of mine took me down to South Africa. There's a friend of mine who is engaged and involved in our supplier diversity effort. He's one of our advisors. So he took me down because he was going down. He said, I want to take you down here as an executive within the U.S. economy who's got responsibility for supplier diversity, but also who looks like us. And you can describe what it is that you've done. And he was going to provide training to the suppliers. So we go down. And he had also sort of framed it up as, me being very involved and engaged in the energy sector. So he had meetings scheduled for me with the Minister of Mines and and Energy and Mines. And so we got a chance to go in and have some conversation with them. The most striking thing for me was when the mayor of the area of Pretoria stood up and made these comments. He said, first, I want to welcome you home. I want to welcome you home. He said, we cannot imagine you having been separated from your culture the way you have. He said, but I want you to know, we want you to know what an inspiration you are to us because we have watched your progress. And so he said, when we were going through and rallying around apartheid and the education of our kids and so on and so forth, our inspiration was you. And for the first time, if he had kept on, I tell you, I would have been bawling. But for the first time, I began to recognize where we are, how important we are within the African diaspora. How many look to us within the African diaspora for leadership, inspiration, guidance. And in so many instances, what I have to say then is we have not organized ourselves to do that and to be that. We have struggled here, and that in and of itself has provided that inspiration. But in so many instances, particularly when you talk about economic growth for developing countries, so let's just broaden it out. Developing countries. 1.2 billion people live in developed economies. Another 5.6 or so billion people live in underdeveloped or developing economies. Okay? And most of those in underdeveloped and developing economies are people of color. So we have a lot to say about the growth and development of these economies if we will step up to the plate. And the work that we are doing internationally within AABE, through the AABE Institute, through the ongoing dialogue that we have with those who are in prominent positions within the energy sector, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in the Caribbean, wherever it might be, wherever the African diaspora is. And I would even broaden it out to say people of color. We have, I think, a unique value proposition to offer the rest of the world, because we have 2,000 professionals who know and understand the energy sector from front to back.